Hi, Tori Hartman here with Psychic Chat. And I was just going to chat for a minute or two about the concept of when we see the greatness in others and we don't see it in ourselves, and why that is. And I was talking last night with my spiritual club, and one of the things that I was really explaining was the concept of how when we grew up with any kind of damage from our childhood, most of the time, what happens is we take that on and it becomes almost like we're prisms. Remember when we were little, you could take a prism and hold it up against light and the light refracts through it. You can see beautiful rays of light through the prism. And the idea is that when we grow up with challenging circumstances, we become like prisms and split light. And others can see the beauty in us, and often we can't see it in ourselves. And I was just talking about how it's kind of like this. If you imagine, like I watch, and everybody always teases me because I watch every like forensic show out there. I'm always into this stuff. And I always think, I find anything that's investigative very interesting. And they do this thing with fingerprints, obviously, and with a fingerprint, it has to be, in order to match it, it has to be what they call a 7-point match, right? So there has to be 7 points. And so what I was explaining last night was that a fingerprint, in a sense, is much like what I talk about with a prism, in terms of the light that comes through you. And you have to be aware of at least 7 of your points of light in order to have high self-esteem. And I see this as a psychic, that I can see all of the light in you, and I can see the potential in you. And a lot of people can see potential in others too, and I think what happens is we deeply fall in love with potential instead of what people see in their own light. And so I was explaining to a friend of mine last night, or the other night, night before last, where all this kind of came up, was that I said, well, the issue is she'd had issues with her husband. It was very challenging, and they're now long divorced. And I said to her, well, he was really like a 3. She said, what? I said, well, he only saw 3 of his rays of light. And the issue is that if someone is less than a 5 and they're not working on themselves, they're looking at you as their source. And it's extremely draining to be around people that are not seeing their own light. And in any aspect of life, in any walk of life you're in, if people aren't seeing their own potential or their own greatness, it's really challenging to be around them. And I find a lot of people, when people come to Spiritual Club, people are around 5 or 6 and they're really working on themselves, and it's really exciting to see how people grow into 7s and 8s. And I was saying last night in the club meeting, I said, don't worry about a 20. That's like Dalai Lama level. Most of us will not be at 20, and that means we'll be ascended at that point. So it's really more about, when I talk about these rays of light and what you're seeing, I'm really talking about feeling and experiencing what you have to offer and who you are. So in a sense, energetically, you're not a burden to others. And so when people drain you, it's because they're draining your light because they don't see their own. And what I find is that most people that I can be in communication with are really at a 7 or higher. And I can work with people who are 5 or 6 as long as they're working on themselves. I've even worked with people at 3 and 4 who I've had relationships with because they're actively doing work to kind of expand and find their self-esteem. So when I talk about levels of light and where you're at, it's really important to understand that the challenges from our childhood give us the ability to see greatness in others. And that's one of the most remarkable things about people who come from challenging backgrounds, and alcoholism and every kind of ism out there. So just remember that it's really about stepping forward and seeing who you really are and what you bring to the table and what your worth is, and worth meaning energetically, because that is the greatest gift you can give someone else, is the gift of knowing who you are, so you don't burden them with them having to know who you are. That's my psychic minute for the week. Well, maybe a couple minutes, and I hope to see you again soon.